Hello. Thank you all for coming to our 2021-2022 Anne Ray Intern Colloquium. My name is Paloma Lopez, and I am an educator at the Indian Arts Research Center at the School for Advanced Research. We are joining you today from the campus of the School for Advanced Research, which is located on traditional lands of the Tewa people, Ogopogo Owingeh or White Shell Water Place, also known as Santa Fe, New Mexico. Surrounding our campus are the landscapes of Pueblo, Apache, and Navajo communities whose people continue to maintain vital connections to this place. As an institution privileged to steward Indigenous cultural material and committed to uplifting Indigenous voices, we strive to maintain respectful and mutually beneficial relationships with these communities. We not only honor the ancestral stewards of this land, but celebrate their past, present, and future. It has been my pleasure to get to know and work with this year's Anne Ray interns, Rachel Gigama and Raquel West. Rachel and Raquel have become an integral part of the IARC's day-to-day, and we will be sad to say goodbye to them, but know that they both have bright futures ahead of them. Rachel Gigama is a member of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma. Before coming to SAR, she graduated from Syracuse University with a master's in museum studies. She has previously held positions at the Richardson Bates House Museum, the Sewell and Leon Gallery, and the Davis Gallery at Holbert and William Smith Colleges. Rachel is particularly interested in decolonizing methodologies within museum collections. In the future, Rachel plans to continue her work in the museum field, focusing on collections management and registration. Rachel's presentation, titled Indigenous Collections Care, will focus on the Indigenous Collections Care practices both she and Raquel learned and participated in during their time at the IARC. Her presentation is an in-depth look at the IARC's collections care process and their collaborative stewardship practices. Raquel West earned her bachelor's degree in geography and history with a minor in American Indian Studies from the University of Washington in 2020. Before coming to SAR, Raquel worked as the collections outreach coordinator at the Burke Museum's Bill Holmes Center for the Study of Northwest Native Art and volunteered at the Suquamish Museum in Washington. Raquel is interested in better understanding how museums can be utilized to affect large-scale social change by prioritizing community-driven engagement. Her future plans include attending the University of California, San Diego this coming year as a PhD student in their Ethnic Studies department. She intends to continue studying museum spaces and their role in social justice movements. Raquel's presentation, IARC's Interns in-person exhibitions, a digitization, discusses the processes involved in developing in-person intern exhibitions at the IARC and serves as a digitization of said exhibitions. Today's presentations have been pre-recorded. I will play both videos back to back, and then Rachel and Raquel will join me on screen for a live Q&A. So without further ado, I will share my screen with you.
Hello everyone, my name is Rachel Gigama. I am an enrolled member of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma, and I'm one of the 2021-2022 Anne Ray Interns. I first would like to start off by acknowledging that I'm a guest on this land. SAR is located on the traditional lands of the Tewa people, and I wish to give my deepest respect and gratitude to all Indigenous ancestors who once lived here and to my fellow Indigenous people who continue to reside here today. One of the things that brought me here to SAR was the Indian Arts Research Center's collection and their collaborative stewardship practices. The IRC's commitment to community and creating close personal relationships with people is special and something I'm so proud to have taken a part in, even if for these very quick 9 months. After this internship, I want my future museum work to be focused in collection management and registration. So for the past 3 months, I have devoted my Tuesdays to doing Indigenous Collections Care readings and curriculum to better understand care and collaboration within these collections. Because of this, I wish to present and share with you all the type of collections care practices I participated in here at SAR and the work I will bring with me to my future career. To begin, it is important to note that there is not a one-size-fits-all practice for Indigenous collections care. Depending on the collection and the community you're working with changes how we as museum workers handle and interact with communities and their pieces. This is just what I have learned working with this specific collection and will provide jumping off points for future collaborative work. One of the first collection projects that I took part in was learning how to create mounts. The IRC's collection staff are always in the process of building or upgrading mounts, and whenever there was free collection time, I would get to work with the collection pieces, such as pottery, jewelry, and baskets, to give them new supportive homes. Object mounts are made out of archivally safe materials so that the objects are kept safe by reducing direct handling and alleviating any stress being put onto the delicate parts of the piece. There are many different types of mounts that are appropriate for different types of objects, but I worked primarily with ring, cavity, and cradle mounts. Ring mounts, pictured in the center of the slide, are mainly used for round pottery, but they can work for any piece with a rounded base. This type of mount allows the base and sides to be supported while elevating the base away from any surface it's resting on. It also prevents the piece from rocking while being transferred around on the cart, or if someone were to accidentally bump into the surface space it's resting on. Cavity mounts are custom carved cavities in ethafoam or velara that fit the shape of the piece. To create the mount for the Dene necklace shown on the right, I traced the necklace on a piece of unbuffered tissue paper, pinned down the tissue into a piece of ethafoam, and carefully carved out the shape. Once the initial shape is carved out, I went in and made some areas deeper so that the necklace could comfortably lay flat, and finished it off by tucking in a layer of soft Tyvek to create a barrier layer for the ethafoam and the necklace. This type of mount provides a lot of support and is good for small, irregularly shaped ceramics, jewelry, and other fragile pieces. If stable and with a solid coroplast base beneath the ethafoam, the piece can be carried in its cavity mount. Cradle mounts, the image on the left, are used to support pieces with irregularly shaped bottoms or with bottoms so fragile they should not have weight put on them. These type of mounts are also great for slouching basketry, as they keep the piece from continuing to fall. These mounts I found particularly challenging just from having to custom carve the different curves of a piece. Once you make your ethafoam wedges, you create a blue board or a coroplast tray and glue the wedges to support each side of the piece. While I did mainly work within the three mounts I just explained, I did get to create some more complicated mounts. These two mounts were made specifically to be packed for loans and travel, so they had to be a bit more secure than what would be needed to stay on our shelves. I will not take credit for the one on the right. That one was made by our assistant collection manager, Molly Winslow, but I did make the mount on the left, and both utilize similar techniques. For my mount, I used the pre-existing cavity mount for the piece and then cut the blue board into a square to fit the size of the box that the piece was traveling in. I then made and glued some ethafoam bumpers to the board so that the piece wouldn't slide around. And for some extra security, I used some twill tape and square velara to create little seat belts to strap the piece down. Molly's mount is similar to this, except she created a tray for her cavity mount to sit in and made a drop-down side on her board, so when the piece is sitting in the box, it has that extra piece of ethafoam bumper to protect the front of the piece and to keep it from tipping forward. These type of mounts were incredibly fun and rewarding to make because it requires not only analyzing and spending time with the piece to understand exactly what it needs, but also allowed me to utilize my mount making knowledge and to combine multiple mount styles and be creative with the design. All of these mounts are also great because they provide another place to attach an additional object label that is more visible and alleviates the need to directly handle the piece to look for its number. And speaking of object labeling, another piece of collection management that I learned was how to safely label an object in a way that wasn't invasive to the piece. As a rule, good preservation and conservation work should be reversible, and the same is the case for object labeling. This sadly was not always the case in the museum field, and as there are several instances where labels were directly written onto a piece, or in some truly upsetting cases, physically carved into them. And while numbering an object is incredibly important within a museum collection, it should never disrupt or disturb the life that the artist has given to the piece. But why do we label pieces to begin with? With a number written on or attached to them, we will always be able to know what the item's number is, can make sure it's in the correct location and find it easily, and can reference its documentation more quickly. So for 3D objects such as pottery, we use printed object labels, like what is shown in the right image. By printing them, we make sure that the font is legible and that the point size chosen for the numbers are appropriate for the size of the piece. We also are sure to print onto acid-free paper and that the printer is up to archival standards. Once the numbers have been printed with multiple different point sizes to test what fits best for the piece, we cut out the numbers and round off the corners to prevent them from catching on things and peeling. Then finally, we spread a thin layer of archivally safe adhesive on the object, put the accession number on, then seal it with another layer of adhesive on top. The adhesive is water soluble, so it can be removed by using a small bit of water on a cotton swab. For textile labeling, we have to use a different technique by physically sewing the label into the piece pictured on the left. We try to write the object number as legible as possible on a thin rectangular piece of cotton twill tape. Once the ink is dried, we do 3 back stitches on the corner of the label before starting a whip stitch into the actual textile. We then go all the way around the label using the whip stitch to sew a single strand of thread through gaps in the weave, making sure to never pierce through any fibers. The aim is to make sure that the label cannot later be caught on something and pull on the piece. Once you've made your way all the way around the label, we close off with 3 more back stitches to avoid using knots and putting any strain on the fibers of the piece. What is important with object labeling, besides being careful with your handling, is to try and be consistent with the location of the marking or label so that it is either easily accessible without actually handling the object itself, or in a common place where everyone on staff will know where to look for it. While deterioration is a natural process, the IRC, as well as other museums, still prioritize preventative care. Knowing factors that accelerate deterioration allows us to take steps to reduce the rate of it and to better protect the pieces in our care. The most common agents of deterioration are temperature, humidity, light, and pests. I won't go into too much detail on these things since this is primarily a lot of memorizing numbers, but I will just sum it up by saying that the most important things to remember are avoiding extreme temperature and humidity, trying to keep it as stable and consistent as possible, and constantly monitoring the collection space conditions. While the environmental conditions of a collection are important, how the physical object is being housed is also a necessary consideration. I've already discussed some mount options for 3D pieces, but as you can see from the photos, textile and works on paper had different housing needs. Pictured on the left is Raquel and I wrapping a finished rolled textile in polyethylene sheet tubing. Raquel and I are also wearing our personal protective equipment, or PPE, because this textile has been chemically treated. Throughout the 19th and well into the 20th century, museums started applying chemicals onto their collection pieces to prevent them from being damaged by pests. Although private collectors and dealers also participated in treating their collection, museums were the biggest proponents of chemically treating objects. We, of course, do not continue this practice today and instead focus on preventative care procedures. But the effects of using these chemicals on Indigenous collections is still felt today, especially when considering repatriation and tribal community handling. With tribal community standards in mind, I do want to talk more on some specific culturally appropriative care, handling, and housing options for an Indigenous collection. As I stated at the beginning of this presentation, there isn't one correct way of handling and housing these objects, since every tribal community has its own ways of taking care of their pieces. Because of this, we provide tribal community members with potential options that they can choose that still stay within museum best practices. For example, there are a multitude of different housing options that we can provide for a piece. Many Indigenous communities consider items to be imbued with spirit or alive, and as such, they may require housing that is more breathable or need offerings or feedings. Pictured on the left of the slide is a breathable box. It's the same process of how we make a normal blueboard box, except we cut a hole in the lid and place a breathable material like muslin over it. We could also wrap a piece in a specific material that a community requests and place an acid-free tissue barrier between. Pictured in the center of the slide is a yucca ring mount that could replace the usual ring mount made of ethafoam. We also take into consideration that a piece might need to be housed separate from the rest of the collection or in a specific alignment or orientation. Offerings such as tobacco and feedings is also an option that is given to communities. This requires asking questions like what should be placed and where, who should place it, and how long should the offering remain, and how often should it be provided. I know from learning from my master's program and working in previous museum spaces that the thought of having food anywhere near a collection space is terrifying for a lot of collections people. But I can comfortably say that it is completely possible to make it work while keeping the collection safe. It will require more monitoring in that area and possibly setting extra traps around the food, but it is possible to safely do. Being aware of handling practices is also important. Obviously, physical handling is a foundational aspect of collection stewardship, but each Indigenous community may have their own standards and guidelines as to who can handle or be in the presence of an ancestor or cultural or ceremonial item and under what conditions. Some examples of this could be that only men can handle a piece, women can handle under certain conditions, or that only tribal members can handle the object. These standards may require additional planning or preparation when working with the collection, depending on the makeup of the staff. It also is important to implement the handling guidelines onto container labels or object labels. Containers and items with specific handling and access restrictions should be clearly labeled in an established and institutionally integrated system to make sure that handling procedures are honored and understood. One of the things I'm most looking forward to doing in my future work is implementing collection reviews into the institutions that I work in. Since 2008, the IARC has worked in collaboration with representatives from Pueblo communities in an effort to review every piece in the IARC collection. These collection reviews recognize community knowledge as a primary source of information and ensure that collection items are represented as accurately as possible and in an appropriate manner. The first review was with Zuni and officially started in 2009 and was completed in 2017. Then we reviewed with Acoma in 2015, Tsuke in 2019, and now in 2022, we are working with Isleta. For the first review we did with Isleta, we had to pack up some of the collection pieces since we were going to do the review at Isleta's Cultural Center due to COVID. Pictured on the slide, you can see one of our tables filled with boxes for the move and some of the complicated mounts that were made, including some elevated trays that create a second level to the box. I unfortunately was unable to take part in the first collection review due to COVID restrictions, but I was able to attend the second review since Isleta community members were able to join us here at the IARC. So the basic setup for a collection review is that we start off with the physical review. We put out all the objects on the table for easy viewing and faster switch out times for the pieces. Then once we have the object in place that we'll be talking about, we pull up the object records on our collection database and read out all the information that we have for the piece. After we give out all the information we currently have, our job as staff is to then sit, listen, and take notes on what the tribal community has to say about the piece. We might prompt some conversation by asking a few questions, but we always like to make it clear that we aren't looking for any specific information and are more so there to write on whatever the community members feel willing to share and think is important knowledge to be saved. Once we're done with the physical review, our registrar for cultural projects, Stephanie Riley, goes through all the notes we took from the review and compiles them into our collection database. Once that information is in our database, we start the data review sessions. We do this to ensure that the IARC staff accurately interpreted the remarks and information given to us during the review. Community representatives are encouraged to share the new entries with people at home, then come back to sit with IARC staff to discuss any needed changes. Once the data review is done, this is the finished product for our database. Each object has a section that includes tribal collection review remarks that has all of our notes, and another section that lists any tribal instructions on handling, housing, or access. Collection reviews are incredibly important to museum work. By creating these relationships with tribal communities, we only benefit from their knowledge and the connection to these pieces. We are able to make our records a better resource for both IARC staff and the community, as well as ensuring all the IARC collection items are treated with respect and in a culturally appropriate manner. With all of that said, I wish to say a huge thank you to the wonderful ladies at Isleta who joined us for the collection review. Being able to sit in on the review and listen and learn from you all was absolutely amazing and definitely was a highlight of my internship. Thank you for sharing your time, knowledge, and laughs with us here at the IARC. After going through some ways to implement tribal knowledge into the museum collection, I feel like now would be a great time to mention the guidelines for collaboration. The guidelines were developed over a 3-year period of collaboration between Native and non-Native museum professionals, cultural leaders, and artists. It is intended as a resource for museums and communities on how to carry out collaborative work. To go into more detail, I'm going to play the Guidelines for Collaboration video on the SCR YouTube channel.
Here at the School for Advanced Research in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a new initiative began to essentially set the record straight. We soon realized, and others did as well, around the world, that the idea of bringing source communities together with collections was the right thing to do. The idea of building collaborations between communities and museums and their collections was a new level of engagement. And this was part of the essence of building our guidelines for communities to work with collections. Over the course of several years, members of Native communities and museum professionals gathered to develop and think critically about guidelines for collaboration. The result is 2 documents that are straightforward and accessible: Guidelines for Museums to Collaborate with Communities and guidelines for communities to collaborate with museums. They are continually evolving documents intended to be foundations for shared learning, cooperation, and collaboration. The two guideline documents address several considerations, including establishing relationships and dialogue based on mutual respect, effecting change in museum policy, adding to and correcting museum collection records, and what to expect when engaging with museums and communities. The community guidelines for communities to work with museums will serve this role of, first, how to contact museums. How do you react when museums contact you, and all the steps from there forward, based on the experience of many people working with museums, within museums, community people, community experts, and so on. It's the additive work of many of these people that has gone into building these guidelines. Inclusion of expert peoples representing the source of collection materials is the keystone of a collaborative movement. Welcoming and respecting knowledge of objects by the makers and users of the objects and appreciating a new museum stewardship paradigm does not change the objects. Collaboration simply brings museums and communities closer to a shared expression of the human experience. Consider using the guidelines in your work, in whole or in part. Share them with your colleagues and trustees, and provide feedback on how to make the guidelines better for everyone. Through pure collaborative spirit, we will pay tribute to voices of objects, as the objects should be perceived and understood.
I was fortunate to experience and learn about collection reviews in person here at the IARC, but with the existence of the guidelines and with it being online, it allows for a more accessible understanding for people outside of SAR. As was stated in the video, both of these documents are not meant to be set in stone and are meant to bring communities and museums together as a way to better understand the collection and each other. The more that we work together and the more we learn from each other, the better we do within our institutions. One of the most important aspects I've learned about collection management here at the IARC is that collection management is informed by professional standards and also by the originating communities whose collections are in our care. It's not only about physically taking care of these pieces, but also spiritually taking care of them. Through not only the teachings and emotional work of Indigenous peoples, but also with museums' willingness to listen and change, collaboration can be successful and make moves to heal the colonial collection practices that museums are founded on. This is the work that I am passionate about, and I'm so grateful to everyone here at the IARC for teaching me. Thank you to my friends here at the IARC, and thank you all for listening.
Hello everyone, my name is Raquel West and I am a 2021-2022 Anne Ray Intern here at the School for Advanced Research. I would like to start by saying I am so grateful for the time that I have been here. 9 months has seemed to fly by while getting to learn from the collections and the staff at the Indian Arts Research Center, as well as getting to learn from the land and the northern New Mexico region. I am zooming to you all from the administration building on SARS's campus, which is located on the traditional lands of the Tewa people. This place is called Ogapoge Owenge, meaning White Shell Water Place, and is also known as Santa Fe. Surrounding the school is the landscapes of the Pueblo, Apache, and Dene communities whose people continue to maintain vital connections to this place. While a land acknowledgement is an important gesture, actionable items are also crucial. As such, I would like to direct viewers to SARS's website to see resources like the Guidelines for Collaboration to learn more about best practices for community-based collaborative collections care and access. I am very excited to be sharing about our in-person exhibitions that we have curated during our internship. The IARC's collection has almost 12,000 pieces of Southwest Native art spanning from the 16th century to the present. It is defined as a research collection, intending to be a resource for artists, scholars, researchers, students, and others. Collections access is an important part of the IARC's mission. While the IARC has had many resources and collections available online for viewing, the global pandemic has shifted conversations on what access looks like. And in light of these conversations on digital access to museums during the pandemic and beyond, I wanted to make my presentation about our in-person exhibitions, the bays and pedestals. This presentation may act as a digitization of our process and exhibitions, and I hope it not only speaks to the internship experience, but also the co-curation process and our work within the IARC's collection. This photo here is of Rachel and I re-rolling textiles after they were professionally photographed. These photos will be placed in the IARC's database to provide quality, high-resolution photos when needed for researchers or publications. In addition to learning how to roll, unroll, and store textiles, we learned how to label different materials, how to link photos and documents into the online database, and how to make mounts that properly relieve stress points to prevent an object from breaking, to name a few. While we've been learning a lot from the collections management and registration work, our time within the education department has also allowed us to explore the collections through curation. During our internship, we curated 3 exhibitions. There are the pedestals located in collection storage, 2 pedestals are in Vault 1, and 1 pedestal is located in Vault 2. The display of silver works from the 2020 to 2021 Anne Ray Interns in Vault 1 is pictured here on the left. We also curated an online exhibit hosted on SARS's website. The center photo here is of an Gigama wedding vase. This year, I curated an online exhibit on wedding vases and artists' diverse expression of this style of pot. Lastly, there is the Bays exhibit. The Bays space allows the interns to curate an exhibition with pieces in SARS's collection of prints. The photo on the right is of last year's interns exhibit on the annual Gallup Intertribal Ceremonial Posters, providing a conversation regarding the posters made by Native artists and the ones made by non-Native artists. Part of the IARC's commitment to collections being accessible to the public includes having these online exhibitions available on SARS's website, in addition to what we call EMuseum. EMuseum is a platform to peruse the collections that have gone through a review and are deemed acceptable for public viewing. Examples of this are pieces that have gone through the collection review process with community or are works made by previous artist fellows. While these points of access were available before the COVID-19 pandemic that has since drastically limited in-person access, they have become even more impactful with the museum world shifting to increase remote methods of engaging with collections. Rachel and my online exhibit will be joining this online exhibition platform at the end of May. Pictured on the right is a screenshot of the EMuseum. You can search by collection, theme, or with the search bar. The IARC continues to add objects to the EMuseum platform as they are approved for online public viewing. This platform is incredibly useful, even for us interns, and it is how Rachel and I found our Bays exhibition topic. For our Bays exhibition, we decided to feature works by Zia painter Henats, also known as Andres Galvin. Visible here are some of Henats' pieces. Born in 1904, Andres Galvin's early painting career consisted of painting pots made by his wife, Margaret. In addition to painting pottery, he also made drawings of pottery designs. He made paintings from Zia pots and pots also from other pueblos. The photos on the left and right are paintings of Pueblo pottery designs, and this drawing in the middle is a watercolor card Henats had painted. While all of Henats' pieces are beautiful, we decided to focus our Bays exhibition on his paintings with birds. Both of these pieces here will be featured in the display. This piece on the left is a drawing of an Gigama pottery design as seen by the Gigama label on the right with his name beside it. And this lower image is labeled similarly with the word Zia and his name, indicating that this piece is a Zia pottery design. We picked bird imagery to showcase in this exhibition as a way to highlight the different styles and designs of this motif. Birds play important roles in Pueblo communities, and Henats drew many different birds from pots in and outside of the collection. Many of the bird paintings in this exhibit are drawings of pottery designs in the IARC's ceramic collection. This drawing on the top is a painted Hopi design, and the pot with this design is featured beside it. The drawing below is a San Ildefonso design with its corresponding pot to the right. Something interesting about Henats' paintings is what he decided to include with the bird designs. This San Ildefonso's jars design on the pot's rim is included in his painting of the design, while the Hopi jar's rim design is not. The circumstances of his research in the IARC collection is currently unknown, but he may have been invited to make these drawings of collection items by Kenneth Chapman, a founder of the Indian Arts Fund and a past curator of the IARC, or other Laboratory of Anthropology staff. Despite this lack of knowing, seeing these paintings with their corresponding pots is pretty amazing. SARS acquired the collection of Henats Paintings in 1979 and 1980. The estate of Hazel Hyde gifted 105 drawings, which was one of the first donations received at the IARC's new facility where we are housed now. A majority of the rest of the IARC's Andre Scalvin collection came as a gift from Dr. Michael Behoen, leading to a 189 collection in total. This is part of how Rachel and I chose to feature Henats Paintings for our Bays exhibit. As mentioned, this extensive collection is available on the EMuseum, and with many connections to IARC's ceramic collection, we saw an opportunity to highlight the relationship between paintings and pottery. Here's another example of this with a San Ildefonso water jar and a Santa Ana jar. It is also interesting to notice the differences between the drawings and the jar's birds. For example, with the San Ildefonso painting, the bird's head is a lot smaller with a longer body in Henats' version. Lastly, these paintings and their corresponding pots are both from Gigama. We can see the difference in these birds as well. There are 3 smaller birds in the left design and then a parrot in the right design. Looking at all of these paintings together showcases the similarities and differences in styles and designs between and within Pueblo pottery. This also demonstrates how the IARC's collection is one of research. We see Henats Paintings as having been researched from the IARC's pottery collection and can now, in turn, study these drawings. An example of this is seen within the IARC's Artist Residency Fellowships. The IARC hosts 3 artist residencies a year for Native artists to spend 3 months on SARS's campus. There is a provided studio as well as housing to allow artists the space, time, and funding to work on what they'd like. This is accompanied by access to the collections, with some artists explicitly having a research element to their residency. This was the case for Ulysses Reed, who held the Ronald and Susan Dubin Fellowship in 2009. Reed is a Zia potter and used his time at the IARC to study his grandfather, Henats' collection. Reed intended to produce pottery with designs from his grandfather's paintings. The painting on the left is a Zia pottery design, and the bowl on the right hosts this design alongside a parrot design used by Reed's grandmother. This pot was made during Reed's residency and then purchased with funds donated to the IARC's collection. This story and pot highlights the historic and contemporary importance of these designs and the IARC's role as a research institution centered on access. To put up this exhibition, Rachel and I learned how to mat. The prints are matted in the bays, and we had a training with a paper conservator to make the mats for all of the paintings going on display. In this top left image, Rachel and I are measuring a piece and figuring out which size mat board we should use. In addition, in the bottom left, we are cutting out the matting board. And in this image on the right, we are placing the print inside the mat and deciding how it should be centered. A lot of these paintings have Henats' signature near the very edge of the paper, and so to have these visible in the mat, we chose to decenter some of these paintings. Additionally, some of these paintings were too fragile to be exhibited. This was due to a variety of reasons, but the most common being that the painting had fragile corners. Our matting process consists of tucking the painting's corners into a plastic corner film. The plastic corners have adhesive so that they can hold the painting in the mat board's window. Thus, if the painting's corners were already tearing or damaged, we were unable to mat these. To include some of these drawings that were not safe for exhibition, we were able to print copies from the high-resolution photos previously taken from the database. These copies will be noted in the exhibition. We also made 16 copies out of our 22-piece exhibit for a corresponding feature in the administration building's main hall. Pictured here is the hall with last year's interns exhibit displayed on the right. This provides a connection between the Bay's space in the IARC and the rest of SARS's campus. We are so excited to finish this exhibit. It should be up at the end of May if anyone wants to see these stunning pieces in the IARC or in the admin building. Next, I will be talking about our pedestal exhibitions. As previously mentioned, there are 3 pedestals, 2 in Vault 1 and 1 in Vault 2. We are following in the footsteps of past interns and have different pedestal exhibitions corresponding to what materials each vault holds. Pictured on the left is a necklace in our Vault 1 exhibition on Depression-era jewelry, and the photo on the right shows the baskets that will be displayed in Vault 2. I'll begin with Vault 2. Seen in this photo, we have 2 baskets on the top box and 3 different columns of baskets on display below. Each column has 4 baskets sized from largest to smallest. We decided to display miniature basketry to showcase as many baskets as possible on the one pedestal. While Rachel and I were deciding on the pedestal displays, we each chose a collection we would like to feature. I chose Basketry, which is stored in Vault 2. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest and have learned a lot about the baskets made in that region. I wanted to learn more about the baskets here and was excited that this exhibition provided an opportunity to spend more time with the IARC's Basketry collection. The baskets in this display are from some Southwest tribes whose ancestral territories have ties to land in what is now called Arizona. Tohono O'odham, White Mountain Apache, San Juan Southern Paiute, and Dene baskets are featured in this exhibition. The range of sizes allows many examples in this display, showcasing similarities, differences, and relationships between the various styles and designs. On the left, we have 2 of the 4 baskets with lids from the exhibition. These 2 are coiled baskets from Tohono O'odham. The top is made by an unknown artist with bear grass and yucca, and the bottom is made by Pauline Lopez with white horsehair and brown stitches. On the right, there are 2 of the 4 baskets without lids being displayed, also from Tohono O'odham. Both are made by unknown artists, with the top basket being made of bear grass, yucca, and martinia, and the bottom being made of horsehair. Next, we have the 2 miniature burden baskets that are displayed on the box. This one on the left is the smaller of the 2 and is made by 2 Moonwalker, who is a White Mountain Apache weaver made from natural colored grass, brown dyed grass, and leather wrappings with fringe and 9 tinklers. And the basket on the right is made by Athea Stevens, who is a San Carlos Apache weaver with willow, leather, and tin. Lastly, I will talk about the miniature plate or tray structured baskets, and I want to start with these 2. These 2 are both Navajo wedding baskets, though the basket on the left is made by Grace Leahy, a San Juan Southern Paiute weaver. In the 19th century, some Dene community members began buying their ceremonial wedding baskets from non-Dene weavers. Purchasing these baskets from their neighbors meant spending less time on the needed ceremonial process for these baskets and more time weaving other desired cultural materials. For these communities, basketry was and is an important cultural process, and the pieces in the IARC collection speaks to the tradition and innovation of these practices. The other plate or tray baskets are seen here. Despite appearing similar, these pieces are not categorized as wedding baskets in the database. The one on the left was made by an unknown artist and is thought to be Tohono O'odham. Unfortunately, we do not know more on this piece. And the one on the right is again made by 2 Moonwalker. Having these 4 woven tray structured pieces in a column on the pedestal was a purposeful design choice. Having pieces from different communities that may at a quick glance look similar invites the viewer to draw comparisons and look closer. This also led to our choice to have the 2 burden baskets on the raised box. Having these 2 different sized pieces together begins the process of noticing similarities and differences. Lastly, we have our Vault 1 pedestal display. As previously mentioned, Rachel and I each chose a collection to exhibit, and Rachel chose jewelry. This conveniently worked since Vault 1 stores the jewelry collection. Since the IARC's collection is meant for research, an artist came to study the Depression-era jewelry in the collection earlier this year. Rachel and I both had not known what this phrase meant. Through this visit, we learned that when the stock market crashed in 1929 and the Great Depression followed, Santo Domingo artists began creating innovative jewelry crafted from found, repurposed, and man-made materials. These lightweight pieces are made from small leftover turquoise chips, colorful pieces of plastics that were often made from spoons, forks, and other household goods, pieces of car battery casing or broken phonograph records, and sun-bleached bone or gypsum fashioned into beads. There are only 4 pieces in the collection labeled as Depression-era jewelry, and we wanted to exhibit them. A theme you may have noticed that Rachel and I have continued to focus on throughout our exhibitions is the idea of looking closer. Looking at pieces that may appear similar or different and spending more time seeing trends and uniqueness. Thus, we did not shy away from only featuring 4 pieces amongst the 2 pedestals in Vault 1. The materials are assembled into colorful mosaic pendants for 3 necklaces and a teardrop-shaped earring. These jewelry pieces are often called Thunderbird Jewelry due to the prominence of the Thunderbird figure featured on the central pendant. The representation of each Thunderbird shape, wings facing up as if in flight or relaxed at the side, reflects the individual artist's creative, aesthetic, and agency. 3 of these pieces exhibited are made by unknown artists, with this necklace on the left being made by Santo Domingo jeweler Virginia Crispin. These will be mounted like so, with the necklace by Crispin and earring on one pedestal and the remaining 2 necklaces on the other. Each pedestal has a Thunderbird with raised wings and relaxed wings. For the mounting process for all 3 pedestals, we will be cutting out outlines of mylar to lay directly underneath each piece. This means you won't be able to see the mylar at all. Mylar is made of an archival plastic and provides a barrier layer as the velvet or pedestal material may be hurtful to the piece, especially over time. The Vault 2 pedestal will be installed and displayed after July due to the IARC preparing for one of the largest exhibition loans in SARS's history. The IARC's collaborative exhibit with the Vilchuk Foundation and 60 public community members, titled Grounded in Clay, opens July 31st. As of now, Vault 2 is being used to hold crates for this exhibition. The Vault 1 pedestals will be installed at the end of May. With exhibiting museums, it is sometimes hard for the visitor to realize how large the museum collections is when only seeing one exhibit at a time. Getting to conduct 3 exhibitions at once had its challenges, but was incredibly rewarding to weave together the various skills we brought to this internship and the skills that we learned. Since the IARC is not an exhibiting institution, these displays provide another lens of access to the collections. While anyone can go on a tour and the open storage concept allows visitors to grasp that there are 12,000 pieces in the collection, the exhibits provide an in-depth look at certain topics. And now, having discussed them in this presentation, which will be on SARS's YouTube page, I hope these in-person exhibitions have gone through a digitization process as another way to provide access to the IARC's collections. These exhibitions have been fun to research and curate. I am so thankful to have conducted this process alongside Rachel. I've learned so much from her and want to extend a big thank you to Rachel as well as the other IARC staff who have made these exhibits and internship possible. I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Rachel and Raquel, for those wonderful presentations. If you want to join me on screen, we have a couple of questions in our Q&A, and I have a few questions for you also. Let's start with Mary Unger, who asks, and this is a question you may not have an answer for, but you can speak from your experience. Is there any way to research baskets that are in the collection? For some, the only information the museum has is where the basket came from and its materials. So can you talk a little bit about your process researching baskets?
Yeah, so we kind of combined information that we did find in the database, kind of that was mentioned, and then also we combined that with looking in books in the IARC's extension of SARS's library. And so there's kind of this large wall of books on pottery, basketry, textiles, weaving, and it's in Laura's office in the IARC. And yeah, we kind of combined information from that. And then with what is in TMS, we did definitely use a lot of books to kind of do that research and work on that curation. And you can check those books out from that extension as well. And yeah, it's a large collection. I would very much encourage maybe spending some time kind of looking through all the titles and maybe reading the backs of them and seeing if any of them could be useful.
And I would just also like to add, I'm sorry, Rachel, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to kind of add on to say, once again, promote collection reviews. That like, I completely agree with Mary that like a lot of the books that we did look through were focused more on the materials and like the actual weaving techniques. And there were only a couple of like actual history aspects to it. But that kind of like emphasizes the importance of the work that we're doing with collection reviews, of bringing in actual community and artists themselves to talk about it and to get that background.
And
Yes.
I don't know when the Basketry collections reviews will be done, but hopefully soon.
Yeah, I was going to say that also once we get around to doing collections reviews that includes those baskets, eventually we will have more information to put up in the eMuseum. Okay, so I have a question for Rachel. Have you always been interested in Indigenous Museum Collections Care, or is that something that you gained working here at the IARC?
No, I guess my histories with museums are a little weird. I didn't even want to get into museums until I was in my final year of undergrad. And then I was introduced to doing install and prep work. And that kind of introduced me into doing like wanting to get into museum work. And then I think through doing my master's program and figuring out like the history of museums and like the work that needs to be done in museums, I realized that my position specifically as an Indigenous person that wants to work in museums would like, I need that background in doing this Indigenous collections care work. And so that's kind of where SAR came in for that aspect for it. So I guess I would say that specifically collection work within museums started earlier, but my like specifically wanting to do Indigenous collections care was, and the passion behind that was brought on by working here at SAR.
Great, thank you. Raquel, you spoke a little bit about how you came to choose Henats as for your Bays exhibition. Was it your first choice? Did you go through other ideas initially? What was the first thing that sort of drew you to Henats pieces?
I think we weren't thinking as much on the Bays at the beginning. I think we were both kind of spending a lot of time thinking about what our pedestal exhibitions might be. And then we kind of realized, okay, we need to, start working on the Bays exhibits as well. And I actually went on eMuseum and just kind of started looking around, and I was like, wow, there's this really large collection of paintings from Andres Galvin, and started looking through them, and they're just so stunning. And again, to have such a large collection was really wonderful. And so I kind of pitched it to Rachel and we picked kind of a more narrow theme of birds as was talked about, and kind of got to really explore his works from there. And so you can actually see the collection on eMuseum, and it was just very captivating. And so I think once I saw that, I was kind of like, okay, can we do Henats pieces, please? Like, yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
I think what also was another like deciding factor for us is that we really liked the idea of connecting the design pieces to actual physical pottery within the collection, and that history too, with one of our artist fellows,
Ulysses Reed.
Yeah, that's a great connection too.
Yeah, and I actually think during our first tour of the IARC's collection, maybe the second tour, it was that pot that Ulysses Reed had made was brought up in connection to Henats painting collection. And I remember being like, that's really cool. Like, I want to learn more about that. And then, time went on and I forgot. And then we started curating and then it like came up again. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And so, yeah, definitely kind of connecting those pieces was a big part of it.
Okay, great. Gabriella Moreno asks, she says, thank you, Rachel and Raquel, for these wonderful presentations. I am a research fellow at the Tucson Museum of Art, participating in a grant-funded research project into 84 ancestral Puebloan ceramic vessels. Due to the historic nature of this pottery and its uncertain provenance, we are often left with only the material presence of these vessels to guide us. We are also hoping to work collaboratively with Indigenous makers and scholars to develop more mindful collections records. In your experience working with materials such as this, how did you come into the space of these items? When you are in a position of unknowing, how do you let these works of art guide you? How do you listen to them and attend to their materiality?
It's kind of a big question.
That's a big question, yeah. Can you see the questions on your screen? Or
yeah, I pulled it up.
I mean, this is kind of why I like doing Indigenous collection care work too, is that it truly, like when you're first time like walking into Vault 1, it like is like a spiritual experience. Like you just feel so much power behind being in that space with all those pieces. And I think with a lot of Indigenous care, it's just about respect. And like, I can't fully say like how to go about this specific project because it's all about community, and that only community can really say, how to do those sort of things and how to go about it. But I think just even the way that you have phrased some of your questions is that you're going into it with like already knowing like that respect and that care and like how powerful these pieces can be. And I think that already is like a good place to be at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think, trying to reach out to community and honestly kind of combining a lot of the Indigenous Collections Care pieces that you talked about in your presentation, of, kind of learning about the materials and hearing from community about how those materials should be taken care of is a place to start.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gabriella, for your question. This is a question for both of you. Rachel, in your presentation, you spoke a lot about different collection management skills that you learned or honed through this internship. Is there anything that you found that you enjoyed learning more than other things, or conversely, anything that you found particularly challenging?
I love mount making. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did, but I really enjoy doing that work, and specifically like the more complicated mounts and like getting them ready for packing. I think that is just such a cool, like creative aspect to collection management that I was never taught until I came here. I also learned that I really like doing collection access work and like working with getting people into the collection and like hearing people talk about how they feel about it. And I think that is just such a special connection that we can make with people. And when I initially was looking into doing collection management, I, as an introverted person, was very like, I just want to spend time with the pieces in the back and like not talk to anybody. But like working here and doing the collection reviews and even just having people come in from other states just to do the docent tours, like it's just such a great experience to see how people get so excited about the work that we're doing here. But yeah, I think that collection access and mount making were two things that I really, really enjoy doing here.
How about you, Raquel?
I loved getting to learn all of the collections management things. It was really fun. I did not have a lot of experience with collections care before coming to SARS. One of my favorite activities was textile labeling. I found out that I'm kind of quick at it and I really enjoy it. And so if anyone has textiles they need labeled, let me know. It was just a very fun task. And, you know, as Rachel talked about in her presentation, kind of doing it in such a way where it doesn't harm the textile was really interesting to learn about. I also really love matting. That was something that I love that you're like, okay, bring up the matting. Yeah. That was something that I learned about myself as well. I just found it to be like a very fun activity, and we had a really wonderful kind of training with matting. And so it ended up just being a really enjoyable kind of process to learn.
Great. Raquel, you spoke in your presentation a little bit about wanting to invite closer looking by comparison. Can you talk a little bit more about why you think that's so important and what you hope to sort of elicit in viewers by doing that?
Yeah, I think that we've kind of said this before, but like getting to be with the collections for these 9 months has been so wonderful, and getting to really kind of spend so much time in collections, even just like working in Vault 1 or Vault 2 was just a wonderful experience. And I think that, you know, a lot of exhibitions tend to show lots of pieces, and that, you know, can be really great for the exhibition narrative and the topic. But it also does tend to be a little bit of time with many pieces. And so I think that we kind of did the reverse almost, or like wanted to do kind of the opposite with kind of this concept of a lot of time with a few pieces. And I mean, we just really got to spend so much time like looking and familiarizing ourselves with some of the pieces. There were some pieces, some larger pottery. And so, you know, pottery that needs 2 people to move it to ensure that the moving process is safe, even if it's just going a little distance. And so there were some pots that, you know, I got to spend so much time with, and I just found that to be really special. And so we kind of honed in on that idea of like, let's, you know, really spend lots of time with a couple pieces and kind of make those relationships.
Even in choosing some of the base pieces for Henats' work, like as we were installing it, I found myself being like, wow, I haven't even really like spent time to like look at these in detail. And I found like specific ones that like really drew me, that like initially we were just kind of like choosing them initially for the bird imagery, and then like spending more time installing them, I like found even more of a personal connection. So you know, just to carry that for people who only get to spend an hour of their time in the collection, we wanted to give that opportunity to people.
Yeah, as I talked about in the exhibition, we did list some of the pottery acquisition numbers that do have matching paintings of Henats. And literally yesterday, I happened upon one of those pots, and I was like, I know that design, like that's in the base exhibition. And that was just really special. You brought that up, and I was like, I know that design. And so, yeah, kind of just getting to spend more time and kind of see a couple pieces and really get to see them. So
and that also is more that's applicable to our Vault 1 for the pedestals for the jewelry pieces. Like we knew immediately going in that we wanted to do a pedestal for jewelry because they're always in the vault and people don't get to access that. And so it was also not only a moment of like, we have 4 pieces within this very small collection specifically geared towards Depression era jewelry. So like people actually do spend time like looking at the specific details and the materials of those pieces, but then it also is like, you never even really get to see the jewelry usually. And so bringing those out so they have their time to shine and for people to love on them, I think was also an important detail for us.
Great, thank you. And I think we're going to just end with a question from Amy Schiffer for the both of you. And she wants to know, what advice would you give the next set of interns?
For me, I would say like truly enjoy your time here. It goes by so fast. Like it feels like it was just March where we were going to Herd Market. Like it felt like that was yesterday. And then it also felt like we just moved in too. Like it has gone by so fast, and there's still like, I love working here and I love the projects that I got to do here. And so fully just appreciating the time that you spend with this collection and like learning from everybody here, I think is what I would pass on to the interns.
Yeah, kind of echoing that last bit, spend time with the collections. Like, of course you will, because you're doing so many projects, but that was just wonderful getting to be in the space and getting to learn about pottery and the pots and collection and kind of all of the inner workings of the IARC and here at SARS, and just very appreciative. It flies by. Yeah. I hope you enjoy it.
Well, I want to thank you both again for wonderful presentations and really thoughtful answers to these questions. I know that I will miss you. You've been wonderful to work with and get to know, and you've been just so generous and patient with me as I'm growing into my position. So thank you both for that. And I want to thank everybody for watching today. We hope you've learned something. Both Rachel and Raquel's online exhibitions will be up shortly, but the Henats pieces are in the bays. They're also in the admin building here on SAR's campus. If you're ever around, you can come and look at that. And the pedestals are up in Vault 1. Is that correct? Yeah.
And they'll go up in Vault 2 at the very end of July, beginning of August.
So thank you again. And thank you, Rachel and Raquel.
Thank you.